You're listening to the Valley Current.
Thanks for coming on. We've been traveling, so I know my situation hasn't. Yeah, I can see you. You look good.
Well, thank you. Well, you look good too. You look a little bolder.
I look older and bolder.
Not older, but bolder. B-A-L-D.
Bolder, yeah. I got a haircut. I got a haircut, Len.
What they do?
They took it all off.
They cut off two little 1 inches.
Yeah, they took it all off. That's what they did.
Okay, they did.
They got me ready for the summer.
Okay.
I can get through the summer now without getting another haircut. That's the idea.
Oh boy.
So I see you've been active in correcting all these errors that are popping up about the history of your work on WI 38. Do I have the numbers correct? About the virus strain?
I finished that. I'm now working on a new one. I'll send it to you when I'm finished. It's, believe it or not, I'm doing a history of the origins of the National Institute on Aging. Believe it or not, they have absolutely no knowledge of their origins. They don't even.
Well, that's because you've outlived everyone, Len.
Well, that's not it. There are plenty of people who should know, but for reasons that cannot be explained. For example, they don't even have a list of the original members of the council of the NIA, of which I am the only surviving member. They don't have a list of those members, which is unbelievable.
That's crazy. That's surprising.
And I'm also an old friend of Florence Mahoney, who was a very wealthy lady who, with Mary Lasker, another wealthy lady, founded the NIH, and Florence Mahoney went on to actually found the National Institute on Aging. I was a very good friend of Florence. Her husband died. They're a very wealthy family. He was the owner of the Cox newspaper chain in the United States. She had a huge, beautiful home in Georgetown. And because I had similar views as she had, she asked me to be her escort. Because after her husband died, she threw gorgeous parties at her Georgetown home and invited me as her escort. My wife knew about it and thought it was very, very amusing. Florence was more than double my age. And I escorted her several times to spectacular dinner parties at her home in Georgetown. I won't go into all the details now, but that's what I'm working on at the moment, because I know all of these stories that no one else alive apparently knows. So anyhow, that's a story for another time.
So you've been correcting a lot of stuff about the history of your work, haven't you? That's what I've seen recently.
Well, only because the people who think who want to write the history of it are totally ignorant of the history and where to find the truth. It has nothing to do with me in a different position than I have ever been in. It's just because the Catholic Church publications and those people who are anti-abortion and anti-choice people have been after me for years because of my use of an aborted fetus for the work that you read about. So I find it necessary for me to defend myself against these terrible mistakes, many of which I think are purposeful, and also the conclusion of very senior people in the church hierarchy, including a pope, to call me an evil person. And I resent that, and I think I'm right in trying to correct the errors made by these people who make these mistakes.
Well, I thought what you wrote was great. Did they do a retraction, or are they in the process of doing that?
Well, first of all, I don't have an email address. I can't find it anywhere on their website, on the journal's website. I can't find the email address of the author of the article that I criticized, but I did send a copy of what you have to customer service email address and another email address that involves their publications, and asking that they forward it to the author. That happened a couple of days ago. I haven't had a reply, and I doubt I ever will have a reply.
There should be a requirement that they must publish an email address that can take retraction, right?
Well,
that should be like a mandatory thing.
That's a serious problem in a lot of online publications. Many have to do with my work being criticized by legitimate scientists who never leave an email address, so I can't reply. And so the errors by scientists, in fact, exist in the scientific literature because you can't communicate with them.
It's crazy. That's a crazy outcome.
It is. You can imagine that happening in your legal profession, where articles written by lawyers remain uncorrected because writers won't leave their email addresses.
Yeah, I mean, there's a degree of accountability when you're dealing with a case in court, because there's professional liability and professional sanctions that the courts can impose, which the courts have been imposing. And of course, you're registered with the state bar, and you have to keep all your details current with the state bar.
I wish we had a similar situation in science.
Well, that should be a mandatory thing. That should almost be like an absolute requirement. If you're going to submit a publication, you have to keep a current way for people to correct you. That's
true when you submit a publication, an article, to be published in legitimate scientific journals. But most of the problems exist where people publish allegedly scientific articles in popular magazines, and probably fake magazines, that are then widely circulated or at least available online. And so that's really the source of a lot of this business.
Yeah, and I see, as I forward to you more of these articles that keep popping up about how science is changing the notion of what a lifespan is. You keep telling me, why are you wasting your time looking at this stuff? But of course,
Well, most of the articles that you send to me do not have a reply possibility.
Right. Well, it's the same point.
It's impossible to reply to any of them, which I would do if they would provide an email address, but they'd never do. So these amateur writers who are not in the field of aging, most of what you send to me are reporters who are arbitrarily contacting 2 or 3 people in the field of aging and using that as the source of their material. Why they pick the one or two people that they quote is arbitrary and useless. It's like having 50 senior lawyers, all of whom are experts in the same field, and going to one of them or two of them and asking for their opinion on a particular law. Their opinion from one or two people out of 50 might be nonsense and have no bearing on the large belief by all 50 of the lawyers. So it just is very frustrating.
Yeah. But it's interesting because I think people want to believe that science is making great progress in enabling a lifespan and a health span that's going to go towards 125 to 150. And of course, you've been a proponent for a long time of saying that that's really unlikely to ever occur because of the laws of physics, right?
Yes, you're right. There's a whole industry now, as you well know, of companies, startup companies engaged in efforts to increase human longevity, which is impossible. Well, increasing longevity is possible. All you have to do is prevent heart attacks or delay heart attacks and strokes and other ailments. So that's not a problem. The problem is interfering with the aging process, which is impossible. Nobody has ever done that, and nobody ever will. But the reporters who are so naive and uninformed about this subject simply take the word of one or two people who they arbitrarily approached. It's ridiculous. And that's true of a lot of scientific areas other than aging.
Do you think there needs to be a consortium of people that literally vet these articles and sort of point out where the faults are?
Well, that would be beautiful if it could be done, but that's a costly and difficult thing to do. It's like finding a judge who's infallible.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if the reality is we have such a big industry that we're just going to keep seeing more and more of this over and over again.
I think,
or has that been the case for the last 100 years?
Yeah, because the authors of these articles get paid by the magazines or the website. And so they write articles because it makes money for the authors who know nothing about the subject that they're writing about. An editor will say to an author, hey, we need an article about how to solve aging. Do you want to write such an article? We'll pay you $1,000. Sure, they say. Yeah, I'll do that. And that's the way it works.
And that's probably just going to continue, right?
Definitely will continue. I'm sure you find it happening in your area of expertise.
Oh, over and over again. And I guess the question is there more vetting that plays out in the legal field?
There is more vetting in the legal field, yes, at least among the professionals.
So how have you been lately, other than all of this interesting work that you're doing?
Well, I'm fine. I don't know whether I told you that. I think I did that several months ago. I suffered two strange maladies, which consisted of sweating and then extreme fatigue. That happened twice. It has not happened since, at least. So that means it hasn't happened in at least 2 months. My physicians know about it. They have no understanding of its etiology. I'm now doing another blood chemistry. Not that it has there's any reason to believe that something will be found, but it's just as a procedure to be certain there's nothing funny going on. I haven't done the blood test yet. It'll happen in the next few days.
Wow. So when you observe this stuff, you're pretty good at detecting differences, right?
I think so. Yeah. I took all of the preclinical courses and in Penn's medical school. So I have all of the preclinical education of a physician, but not the clinical practice area, of course. So I do know something about medicine and health.
Right. And you don't use any electronic devices, like you don't use any smartwatch or any type of wearable. You're just basing it on how you feel, right?
Well, no, I don't wear anything, but I do take my blood pressure every morning. I've been doing that for years. And I do take my glucose measurements every couple of days. I'm doing that for a couple of years also.
So you do a pinprick for some blood that
Yes,
you enter into a machine?
yes, that's correct. I do that every other day during the week, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And the highest number that I'm not to reach is 180. My number is usually between 110 and 130. So I'm rarely higher than 130 or 140.
And do you adjust your diet when you see that it's going towards 140?
No, because that's not a danger area.
Mm-hmm.
It's a temporary thing. The next day I'll be down to the 120 area. So it's not a permanent. If it was permanent, yes, I would do something. But I don't eat a lot of sugar. I'm currently eating two or three pieces of candy that I bought from C's Candies that I like very much, but they have not caused my glucose values to rise to an abnormal level.
And when you take your blood pressure, do you actually write all the data down in a journal?
Yes, not in a journal, but on papers, and I accumulate them, and I report those numbers, including glucose numbers, to my two physicians every couple of months. They have no comment about anything being wrong.
So that's good that you really do track, and it sounds like you've done it for years, right? You do track your own data.
I've been taking those two vital measurements for years. Yes. And as I say, they're reported to my physicians periodically. But I know that the values are acceptable. If they weren't, I would alert them to that. In fact, my blood pressure is sometimes in a low enough range to be concerned. But only one time about 10 years ago, I had a fall in blood pressure. I'm sorry, in what's called hypoglycemia, low blood sugar, in which I had to take a piece of candy immediately in order to recover from dizziness and potential fainting. That has never happened in the subsequent 10 years.
Are you actually taking your temperature now to watch your temperature over time?
No, I don't take my temperature. I do occasionally take my blood oxygen level with an oximeter that I own.
Mm-hmm.
But my blood oxygen level is always in the normal range, always.
And you're obviously still very careful about COVID and the potential for some COVID consequence, right? Because you wear a mask when you go out, right?
Yes, for instance, today I had my cleaning people arrive. They are here every third Wednesday,
Hmm.
and they get sprayed with alcohol on their hands. And they used to wear masks, but they don't anymore. But I wear a mask.
You're careful. You don't go on planes either, which are probably the biggest risk these days.
Yeah.
We've been
Today,
on lots of planes and we don't see many people, if any, that wear masks. Not even the crew wears masks generally.
well, I always wear a mask when I'm outside
Hmm.
and in contact with people. I went to the post office today, and I avoid seeing any people around me at all. The closest people I see are 30 feet from me. When I went to the hardware store to get some vegetable seeds, that's the first time I've been to in a store with one or two people moving around for many, many months. And I do wear a mask. And when I'm finished, I bathe my hands with alcohol when I get in my car and take all the precautions I think are necessary to mitigate contact with viruses. Because I'm in the most vulnerable group of people for COVID viruses and other viruses.
Did you see in the news that Joe Lieberman died, I guess, yesterday or maybe today at 82?
Joe Lieberman.
He was the VP candidate. He was a
Oh,
senator, U.S. senator, and a VP candidate with Gore, is my recollection.
yes, yes, you're correct. I do remember him. That's sad news.
Does that seem young to you for a guy like him who obviously had all the medical
How
resources?
old was he?
82.
Well, eh, probably his cohort, if he's 82, his cohort average life expectancy was in the mid to low 70s. So he outlived his cohort, if that's anything, if that's useful.
Right. I mean, 80 used to be viewed as kind of like a ripe old age. And now the view is, well, you should really get to 90 or better, just as you have. Right. But
Yes,
you're kind
well,
of an outlier.
average life expectancy in the United States today for a white male is about 78. For a white woman, it's about 81 or 82. So yes, I'm I've exceeded my cohort's life expectancy by a considerable amount. I think that of 100,000 people born in 1928, as I was, maybe 150 or so are left from that cohort. So, yes, I'm an outlier.
And you're an outlier for another reason, which is I think you've previously told me, but correct me if I'm not getting this right, that you don't engage in any type of vigorous exercise. I mean, you get some exercise walking around, but you don't engage in any of this, crazy marathon running or weight lifting or yoga or any of these things that people seem to be doing over and over and over again to try to hope that they're pushing the boundary of lifespan. You don't do any of that stuff, right?
That's correct. I do nothing that you described. I never exercised. My mother, I think I told you this before. My mother lived to the age of 106, and she never exercised either, other than walking up a flight of stairs in a when you lived in a two-bedroom home.
Right.
When I was first married, I lived in a three in an apartment on the third floor, so I walked up three flights of stairs, but that didn't last more than a year. It lasted less than a year. but I do no exercises at all. In fact, I spend too much time sleeping because of this chronic fatigue problem that I have. In these days now, I'm in bed at least 12 hours a day, either sleeping or dozing or watching TV.
Well, does that argue that you should be getting more exercise? You should be trying to put in at least, I don't know, a couple of thousand steps. I mean, there are people that try to put in 10,000 steps a day. They literally count the number of steps that they're putting in, right? That's where they go with this.
No, I don't believe it's necessary, because those exercises are only going to mitigate cardiovascular diseases. And I do not have any symptoms of cardiovascular disease. As I say, my mother never exercised. There are many people who are centenarians who never exercised. In fact, I think most of them never exercised.
It's interesting because Wally, as we know, who's recently deceased, he was such a big believer in exercise. I mean, he was such a huge believer in exercise.
Correct.
I mean, he just lived for exercise. And then, of course, when he stopped exercising, he kind of felt like his life had ended, you know?
Well, I disagreed with his behavior in that respect, and he knew it.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that, and I said this earlier, the only thing that exercise will hopefully prevent is cardiovascular diseases. But as you well know, there are many young people, and I know two at least, who were runners in their 30s and 40s, and they died one day of a heart attack. That's not unknown, as you know, that runners have heart attacks frequently. So there is a price to be paid.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear you.
I don't believe that once you are in your 60s and 70s, I don't believe that it's necessary to exercise.
That's interesting. So you don't even believe getting like a couple of thousand steps in a day is required?
No, I don't. Not if you're in the age groups that I mentioned. In the younger age groups, there may be some benefit, but the evidence is not really powerful.
Interesting. That's really interesting because there's such a big push around this idea of exercise as even more important than diet. But I don't even think you believe that diet is that critical, do you?
No, as long as the diet is varied, my diet is varied, so that you are certain to get a range of nutrients that your body requires. That's all that's necessary. But I don't make a fetish of what I eat. I don't eat a lot of fruit. I eat fruit occasionally. I drink orange juice every morning, and I have an egg twice a week, 3 times a week. Every other day, I make a breakfast mac, which is a English muffin, a block of cheddar cheese, a half slice of bacon or some Italian meat, and a fried egg. And that with the orange juice and coffee is a breakfast that I have 3 times a week.
Right. So you're careful to regulate it in the sense that you're not overeating cholesterol, right? Because you must be concerned about that.
Yes, that's correct. Other than the small amount of meat I have for breakfast, I rarely have meat at night. I frequently have a can of soup.
Mm-hmm.
Like last night, I had a can of Anderson's pea soup.
Mm-hmm.
Tonight, I haven't. I've been thinking about it, and because I had half of a bagel for breakfast, it was left over from Sunday. I will probably have another can of soup tonight, but it will be something more that contains multiple items.
But you're not counting calories, are you?
I never did and never will.
So you don't worry about weight, but it sounds like you must look at your weight from time to time, right?
No, but as I think I mentioned to you once before, it was when that big storm occurred here at the Sea Ranch, when I was without electrical power for 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
You know that story, of course.
Right. Right.
And when I was without electrical power for 10 days, it was very difficult to prepare any meals at all, although I did have propane for use on my stove. I was wrapped in many sweaters and coats, so making any meal was a real hassle. As a result of that, my intake of calories was very low, and I lost about 25 pounds. My weight at that time was about 170, and it dropped to 152,
Wow.
which is where it has been ever since. And I feel much better now that I'm still at 152.
So you pay attention to that, right? Like you
Yeah.
generally pay attention to it.
Yes, I do now, although it's not something I'm focused on. As I said earlier, I eat probably less or exactly the number of calories I need to maintain this weight of 152. First of all, I prepare all of my meals, and so I'm not baking and cooking extravagant meals and all that business. I'm preparing meals that a lazy person prepares.
And you don't think to yourself, well, maybe I should just get a chef or an in-house person to take care of all these details. Like you're very self-sufficient.
So far, thankfully, yes. I now have a lady coming in every 3 weeks to clean the downstairs of my house. But I do take care of a number of items myself, like watering house plants. I just had an invasion of flying ants, which I have had a couple times in the past. And I had to spend about an hour killing them and sweeping them up. So there are a lot of minor chores like that I do. So I'm still capable of maintaining myself. My 5 children are very aware of what I can and cannot do. They call me every night. One of them does serially every night. And I also, as I think I mentioned to you, I send a very brief email message to all 5 of my children every night and tell them about that I'm okay, tell them what the weather is, and a few other details about what may have happened during the day. So they are in constant contact with me. They are on notice to report any changes in my cognition, in addition to anything else that they find out about me that is important in respect to health.
So you're doing something that very few people do in a sense, because you're very much monitoring yourself in ways that most people would delegate to assisted living.
Yes.
Or to some institutional approach. Like you're if you say you're one of, I think you said 150 out of 1,000 in your cohort. Is
Yeah,
that the number?
out of
You're probably
100,000.
like
Yes.
100,000. So you're like 150 out of 100,000. You're probably like one out of 100,000, or one out of that 150 of 100,000 that are actually doing something where you're managing your own aging process and your own way to be careful about self-managing it.
Yeah, I suspect I'm in the very small minority of people who are able to do that. But it's largely also a matter of luck.
Yeah, it is a matter of luck. There's no question about that. It
Yep.
really is.
How is your health?
Well, I think I've been pretty good, but I'm really believing in this exercise and nutrition program. And you're telling me, it's not really about exercise and nutrition, but I've been putting in the steps, putting in the bicycling, putting in the yoga, trying to watch my weight, trying to watch what I eat, trying to eat more vegan. It's really painful because you lose a certain degree of enjoyment of life when you do that. You're
Well,
spending a
yes,
lot of time.
but Jack, I think that's because you had trouble with your weight. I know you told me that for
Right,
many
right,
years.
right,
And so, yes, you're more conscious about what you need to do to either lower it or keep it where you want it to be. So, yes, you're way more conscious about those things, as you should be, than I was, for the reasons I described.
right.
But
Yeah.
so you are doing the right thing. I don't think you're doing anything wrong at all.
Well, I hope I'm doing the right thing, but I have to tell you, I kind of feel sometimes as though you actually end up losing some enjoyment of life as a result, right? You really end up losing a certain degree of quality of life as you make these trade-offs. I think you've in many ways lived the life that you choose to live without worrying about any of these details, right?
Yes, well, fortunately, I never really had a serious weight problem, so you're right in that respect. But uh, I think whatever reduction in the quality of life you think you're experiencing, I think is, in your case, the right thing to do. Um, I don't think that it's a serious compromise of your lifestyle. I think you still are enjoying life way, way more than a lot of people your age with multiple pathologies have that you don't have. So in that sense, you are also lucky. You have to have a positive outlook.
Right. Well, my parents both lived to 90, over 90. Well, my dad lived to 90, my mom lived to 93. And they used to drink and smoke and eat without restriction at all. I mean, they didn't care. They would do what they wanted to do when they wanted to do it. And they would say, live for today and worry less about tomorrow. And they took a view that's sort of along the lines of what you're taking, which is luck plays a big role. Luck plays a big role in this. And they would say, be happy and go lucky. I mean, that's what they would say.
Yes, but I think you're better informed than they were, undoubtedly. And
I mean, that's where the world is headed with these wearables, this idea that you can watch everything in real time, and that as a result, you'll be much more conscious about what's happening. These monitors, these glucose monitors can be 7x24, as opposed to doing the pinpricks. You actually wear a device that's directly connected to your smartphone. And people are doing that now.
Yeah, there's some question about the accuracy of those devices. For example, there's a big controversy now on lawsuits. In fact, on the part of Black people who cannot use a oximeter because the color of their skin interferes with the ability to determine oxygen level.
Wow. That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's a huge lawsuit on the manufacturers who are selling the devices to Black people who they shouldn't be selling them to because of that problem.
Wow. I didn't know that. I didn't read about that. That's news.
Yeah, because the oximeter determines the oxygen level of red blood cells that are seen through white skin.
Ah, okay.
It's very hard to do when your skin is black.
So when you every night you climb a series of steps to get to your bedroom, don't you?
I walk up and down my one flight of stairs at least twice a day, if not 3 or 4 times. Yes.
So that may be the real exercise that you're getting that works on a daily basis.
Well,
realistically,
it could be, but I don't know. It could be. I do walk up the stairs where you actually take cover 2 steps at a time. And I hang tightly onto my staircase railing, because I'm constantly in fear of falling.
Right. I mean, that happened to Wally and to some degree created some degree of immobility for him right in his home. And he had a single floor home. I mean, he slipped on his kitchen floor.
Well, I'm very concerned about falling, and I do a lot around this house to prevent that from happening. I'm holding on to surfaces and walls constantly when I move about my house because of that concern. Right now, I'm growing lots of vegetable seeds. I have seedlings growing for many different kinds of vegetables that I'll be transplanting into my greenhouse a month or more from now. I do that every year. And so that'll provide more exercise because I have to go out every week to my greenhouse to do some work there. But I do enjoy that activity.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing that I think people say is pretty important and that plays out in these blue zones where there's a lot more outdoor physical activity, particularly in places like Italy and the like.
Yeah.
There's been articles about that as well.
Yes, there are.
Well, Len, I have to say you look great. Keep up the self-monitoring. You're definitely doing the right thing. I hope I live in the way you're living in your 90s. When I get to my 90s, I have to say, I'm hoping I get there as well as you've gotten there.
Well, I hope you do too. How is Lee? Is she well?
Lee's great. She's still sort of running marathons and doing these long distance runs. And I'm very jealous of it to some degree. She gets to see a lot more than I see whenever we travel because she goes out for long runs.
Yeah, but you sound perfect. Your cognitive abilities are first class. You sound as though you will make it to 95 or 100.
Well, I hope it goes from your lips right to whoever has any control over that.
To several different gods.
She has several, all of them. I'll take whichever one is influential these days.
Know about. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you take care. When we'll figure out a way to come and see you again because that was a lot of fun.
Okay. Yes, I'm looking forward to the time that you come out to Sea Ranch. You know, you have a guest room here permanently in your possession whenever you want it.
Well, you're really delightful. Thank you for saying that, and thank you for meaning it. And I'll let Lee know. I'm sure she'll be interested.
Give my regards to Lee.
Okay.
Tell her she has a very wonderful husband.
Oh, thank you. I'll tell her that. Thank you. I'll let her know that. Thanks. Thanks, Len.
Tell her I said that and I believe it. So
I appreciate that, Len. That's made my day. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you later.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Regards. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.